I watched last week's Mother's Day rally, thank you Connie and Janet, from the road. Kathy and I were in Washington, D.C. visiting Grace. And because Kathy had an all-day board meeting, I was able to do one of my most favorite solo activities, wandering that most American place, the National Mall and the area around the White House. The rambling walk includes all that's great and inspiring and thought-provoking and frustrating and glorious and annoying about our country's past and present. And it has always made me think about our country's future. And since we all started Justice Southbury, these sights and sounds always lead me to report back to you what I thought and what I heard and what I learned. As Pastor Michael Cobb used to say to me about aha moments, he said, "Rick, that will preach." So I'm going to preach about my field trip to our capital last week. 4 things deserve mention: a couple of memorials, a museum, and a rally. I'm always grateful to walk up the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. I read slowly, and probably for the 30th time, the second inaugural address on the right and the Gettysburg Address on the left. More on that this summer as we continue our exploration of America at 250. I hang with old Abe there for a while as he sits there and stares out at the country, and I wonder what he would see in what we see now, how he would act firmly in the interest of unity and then seek to bind up the wounds. I compare myself to him, and of course I never come close to measuring up. But rather than feeling discouraged about that, I feel encouraged to be more guided by the better angels of my nature. Not always easy, and I fail way too often. But I imagine Abe telling me, like Kathy and I often told our daughters, good, better, best. Never let it rest until your good is better and your better is the best. So I left Abe and I lingered in the spot where, when you walk down the stairs, where MLK gave his I Have a Dream speech. If you don't know, the space is marked there. And then I went over to the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. And again, I've been many times, and as you probably know, it's solemn and breathtaking, and the number of deaths is overwhelming. And although there was nothing really new for me to learn about this sacred spot, I took one of the brochures anyway, and so of course I did learn something new. The brochure says, in honor of the men and women of the armed forces of the United States who served in the Vietnam War, the names of those who gave their lives and of those who remain missing are inscribed in the order they were taken from us. And I hadn't really thought about that last part before. I remembered this, that when you walk from left to right at the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, you go from beginning to the end of the staggering list of deaths. But I decided to pay some more attention to the earliest lives lost in Vietnam. Of the first 11 men killed in Vietnam, 5 were juniors, and another was a third. That's 6 men, more than half of the first 11 killed, who were named after their fathers. To put it another way, these were sons given names by their father and mother, which would honor their legacy, continue a family line, provide that the elder would be remembered by the younger, long after he was gone because of the name of the younger. But all of these young men fell before their lives could fulfill that legacy. War is hell. Soldiers are brave. Lives are lost. Families grieve. May we thank those that serve, remember those who don't come home, and hope that our leaders spend a little more time thinking about this. My next stop was at the National Museum of African American History and Culture. This was my 3rd visit since it opened in 2016. I was concerned about how it may have changed, considering the administration's vocal efforts to whitewash elements of our past. Luckily it was, at least for now, fairly intact as a serious review of the achievements and the tribulations of Black America. The museum, which I highly recommend for anyone who's not yet visited, includes both an exhibit and a permanent collection. The exhibit this time was on HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities. When I grew up in Connecticut, About all I knew about their contribution was the annual appeal of the United Negro College Fund. You may remember, a mind is a terrible thing to waste. Well, I learned last weekend that the full motto was, a mind is a terrible thing to waste, but a wonderful thing to invest in. And that more positive statement was tweaked a little for the title of the exhibit. Instead of a mind is a terrible thing to waste, the words on the door are, the mind is a marvelous thing. See how a change in perspective can change the mind. Something like that is what we did here on the corner, adjust the South turned our general focus from racism and cruelty is bad to inclusion and kindness are good, from stop hate to love your neighbor. At the end of this exhibit, after the displays demonstrating how thinkers and graduates of historically black colleges and universities uplift and sustain communities, nurturing innovation in buildings, science, healthcare, education, and much more, an interactive screen asks the visitor, do the stories of activism at HBCUs inspire you? Well, I, of course, said yes. As we found here on the corner, hearing the stories of those who've overcome barriers and who use their strength and courage to work toward a more fair and kind community for all makes us fired up and ready to go. But not yet. Not yet. The museum is designed so that the regular exhibits, the visitor rises as the Black American rises. You begin in the basement, where Gallery 1 is called Slavery and Freedom. You proceed up to Gallery 2, the era of segregation. You end in Gallery 3, a changing America. The exhibit ends in the 2000s with the election of the first black president. When you walk up, you realize you're now on the ground floor, and that the remainder of history has yet to be written. Future visitors will read and learn about the 2010s and 2020s and 2030s. What will our current African American history and culture look like to future generations? That's a loaded question. And we all have a role to play in trying to write this chapter of American life. Will the efforts to characterize slavery as a happy apprenticeship influence our children? Will the gains made be reduced by the backlash? There were a couple of quotes that were on the wall that I thought were specifically resonant with this group. Ida B. Wells said, "The way to right wrongs is to turn the light of truth upon them." Maya Angelou said, "History, despite its wrenching pain, cannot be unlived, but if faced with courage, need not be lived again." Finally, I hung out at a rally in front of the White House. Dozens of Iranians waving Iranian flags, chanting, singing, showing photos of deceased or disappeared family members, calling for an end to this murderous regime. Some wore MAGA hats. They were thanking the president for attacking the regime, imploring him to do more, hopeful that he would not abandon the Iranian people in their struggle for freedom. So many layers to what motivated them, and so many layers to how observers observed. Was that a good thing for liberals that I should have cheered? Was it a good thing for conservatives that I was supposed to feel opposed to? How can we not want an end to the suffering of the great Persian peoples? But how to support them? More bombs? American ground troops? What did this group of people want from us? And how will they feel when inevitably the person who they were most trying to influence outside of his house comes out and tells them, "We won, you won, you're all free because of me, I won"? That will be a harsh reality for the people who are gathered there. So Washington, D.C., I always leave with renewed victory.